So excited that you guys are here. This is a shift in the podcast because we're not just interviewing the woman anymore. We want the team so that we can hear still her story. This is the focus on you today, Chelsea, but we want to hear Casey's perspective and support of how much of a difference that you've made in building the empire. So I'm so honored to have you guys in our home and to get to know your story. So thank you guys so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Excuse me.
I love that. You can leave that in. That would be funny. Okay, perfect. So I just want to give a little bit of an introduction, mostly for the listeners and for you guys too. Just that the MW3 conference last year really made a difference in why we're sitting here today in the first place with the podcast, but also shifted my whole business from being Live Big Little Girl to the Live Big Collective that is now gathering female entrepreneurs as well as wives of entrepreneurs to really hear her side of the story. And so, Casey, I just want to say thank you for putting that event in.
Yeah, there's we were actually talking about it today. I was with a group saying we took a year off from doing that event. And we're like, we need to go do it again. That was like a really special event. Yeah.
It was amazing. It was amazing. So thank you.
Pumps me up that you loved it.
Yeah, no, it was. And I've heard several other people just be like, that was a game changer for me too. But thank you so much for being here. I'm going to read your formal introduction and then we'll just get right into it with questions. Okay, Casey and Chelsea Baugh are the parents to 5 beautiful kids. Their marriage is going on 20 years, and their hearts are dedicated to faith, community, and family. Casey has spent the past 4 years building a private equity firm, Sandlot Partners, teaching entrepreneurship at BYU, capturing stories through his podcast, CaseStudies, and perfecting his golf game. Chelsea is currently getting her MBA at BYU, serving the community through their family foundation and dedicating her time to serving and raising their family. You guys are seriously so cool. Like, just your introduction is amazing. So will you just tell me a little bit about how you met, how you got here, just like a brief introduction to who you are if people don't know anything about you guys?
Yeah, great. Should I go?
Yeah.
Okay. I was raised in Houston, Texas, and decided to play volleyball early on, which led me to want to play in college. So found a position, and luckily the coach wanted me enough. They gave me a partial scholarship, came to UVSC at the time, and started my journey there. And Casey and I met my freshman year, a little bit after his mission that he can speak about, but we met and really hit it off quick. So met November of 2004, engaged April 2005, married November 2005.
He's a smart man. Good job.
we were 12 months.
Yeah, that's right.
I love that.
Yeah, so we met through a friend that we've never heard of again. We haven't even seen his name on social media.
Like a little angel came in.
He was
like, here you guys go.
Secret man who was sent on a mission to bring us
you
together.
Guys together. Cool. I love that.
Yeah.
And then what was your side of the story of that direction?
Very similar. Grew up in Cache Valley, went on a mission to Oklahoma, and went down to UVU to play baseball. And baseball didn't work out. Kind of played the fall, and that was it. And wasn't planning on staying in Utah County. Was trying to figure out. The only reason I came down was for sports, and sports didn't end up being what I wanted it to be. And ultimately ended up meeting Chelsea right around the end of that first semester. And started doing door-to-door sales just as kind of a way to pay for school. And that was close to 20 years ago now. And it just kind of ended up putting down some roots, and this has been home ever since. And so that was the experience, met Chelsea, kind of fell in love with Chelsea, and had to grow up, just kind of like all of us do. You go from being a kid that you kind of have your own expenses and you don't have that much responsibility to we're making bigger decisions. And I think there's some magic in that, having to go become a man, if you will, or like,
Totally.
grow up. And we kind of grew up together, and it's been so fun. We're coming up on 20 years, and
It's amazing.
but it doesn't feel like that long ago. It feels really fresh still.
Yes,
you know.
totally.
Blink of an eye, yeah.
I love that. So, fast forward to now and this new career. Well, not new. It's 4 years, with Sandlot Partners. What does day to day look like now compared to then? Like that was probably a grind period. What does that look like now?
I don't think it's ever stopped being a grind. So I think and I say grind in like the most positive way. Like
Yeah.
I think there's so much magic and so much beauty in hard work. And I've always loved my work. I've always loved going to work, and and there's obviously like, there's things about everything that you don't like, but for the most part, I've liked most of it, or chose to like most of it. And that's kind of where it's at today. The job has been different over the last 20 years, but as far as like the passion and the purpose and just, trying to go create value in the world, that's what it is. So back then it was selling satellites door to door. And today, our focus is finding, really unique investment opportunities to allocate money. And then also we raise capital from high net worths and family offices. And so we spend a lot of time courting potential investors, and so much of it sells. It's just communicating kind of what you're trying to go do and why you're excited about it, and why it'd be a good idea for people to come along with you.
Yeah. I love that.
The grind is different though. I mean, the grind is the same because it's who Casey is. But although 20 years has not seemed like 20 years, it's been truly a blink of an eye situation and in timing. Feels like that, but it has been 20 years. So you can't fake time, and perspective has shifted, right? So our oldest is 16, our youngest is 3. And so with our oldest being 16, she only has 2.5 years left, essentially, in our home.
Yes.
As we know it today, right? We have a great relationship with her, and, time will tell, but I would imagine she's a part of our lives as much as she is now, but maybe not physically, right?
Yes.
And so your perspective starts to shift, and it's been an interesting dynamic to figure out the balance between how do we stay grinding, which is essential just even from a financial perspective, right? While keeping our family first and foremost, which I think was always the intent. But when your kids are littler, I think you have a little less perspective because they're only, the first 5-ish years, it's only 5 years, and you still have 15 and more and counting years with all these kids. So you're like, oh, we've got time.
Yes.
Now the clock is ticking faster and faster. And so I've seen a big shift in our deliberateness and how we approach family time and balance that with work.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think there's just different times and seasons in life too. Like when I think of those early years, there's kind of this desperation hustle. Like
I have to
we
figure
have to
this
pay-
out. We
like,
have to pay
like
bills.
bills don't get paid
Yeah.
unless, and especially like when you're in commission sales, it's all or nothing. It either works or it doesn't. So there's more pressure. And so I think for those first years, there was just so much of that, almost, drinking out of a fire hose, from learning how to be a professional, learning how to master your craft, and then also like physically doing the work. The only time you get paid in sales is when you're working. Where today life is way different. Like your family doesn't eat if you don't succeed isn't there anymore.
Yes.
And so it's working more for just stuff that you're really passionate about and purpose driven. And it doesn't mean that you don't work as hard, but there is also, and maybe even just more wisdom and perspective, saying, we're going to put the big rocks first. We're going to put family, and we're going to put faith, and we're going to put ourselves and our relationship and our health put those big rocks in the schedule and have work fit around those things.
Totally.
Because it will take everything. It'll take every hour that you have. It'll
Mm-hmm.
take every spare minute that you have. And if you're not deliberate in putting those big rocks in, then and it's way different now too. Like Chelsea, we'll get into this, but Chelsea's doing her MBA, and Chelsea, has started a foundation, and so it's almost, I don't want to say the roles are switching, but Chelsea's kind of starting her career. And for a lot of our life, her career has been full-time mom.
Yes.
And now it's doing both. It's actually going and getting the technical and business skills, and, so much of your stuff is not for profit, but it is highly impactful and highly meaningful work. So it's kind of, she's in the same boat where it's how do you put first things first?
Yeah.
Because that stuff will take all of your time.
Yes.
It'll take every extra minute that you have if you give it to it. And so for me, it's been fun I've lived that and I've experienced it personally, and like that struggle of wanting to be a good dad, but also like wanting to be responsible with work, to watching Chelsea go through that struggle.
Yes.
Where it's like wanting to be a good mom and a good husband, but also wanting to like get good grades and also like do a good job with the foundation. So those are fun things.
Totally. So tell us about that. Like, what drew you to getting your MBA, and what's kind of the vision and your purpose behind your foundation and
Great.
everything you have going
Well,
on?
let's see. I have a good girlfriend who invited me to her sister's like informal dissertation. She actually had already done her dissertation for a PhD, and she was actually on the board. I don't know what they call it exactly, but for the Young Women General Presidency, they have a board of women that support them. And so I think Elaine Dalton maybe at the time was the president and said, hey, you need to come and present this. It's so good. And then they allowed certain people to invite a plus one. Yeah. So I was fortunate enough to be available, and she invited me. So I went. And her whole PhD was on nudges, women who feel nudges to go and do and pursue and have the faith and the courage enough to follow them, not knowing what they even mean. And it was just so interesting to hear all of these interviews and, perspectives from these women who said, like, here I am today, but I would have never dreamed that this is where I would be. It's almost laughable to think that this is where I'd be. And a very small percentage of the women said, I actually knew this was my role, and this was my mission and my purpose, and I followed this course, and I could say confidently that this is always what I wanted to do. Very small percentage. And so I honestly think that was a catalyst to nudges I was already feeling. I didn't have the words for it.
Yes.
It was probably after Covey, our third, who's now 10. We dealt with some infertility after her and did some fertility treatments to no avail, and then stepped into the world of adoption. And that was for the first time when my world got a little bit rocked. I mean, we had our first, and this is going way back, and so we'll circle back, but our first was diagnosed with autism when she was 2. And so when we had Callie, and then we had Ava, and then we get this autism diagnosis, I already knew my mission initially was to be a mom. It's what I always wanted, which I think is another point that we can touch on, the things that you want drive you. But it's what I wanted. And then with the autism diagnosis, that became my career. We did therapy 24/7, whether it was physically at a building or just at home all the time. That was my world. And I created a network and a blog, and it was, charity events to support that community, and just diving head first to get the most out of it to really help Callie. And then, she just came out of it so brilliantly, and that's just a whole another story. And then, we have Covey, and then all of a sudden this infertility, and with the autism kind of not at bay, but we had it we had it secured. It felt like we had our arms wrapped around it. And all of a sudden, I'm like, where am I at with life? We want to grow our family, and how are we going to do it? And then we adopt, which was magical and beautiful. We adopted CJ in 2019 and then Tex in 2020.
Wow.
And so,
Back to back.
yeah, and this was COVID as well.
Gosh, yes.
When we adopted CJ, Casey transitioned from Vivint, which was a 13 to 14 year career. And yeah, it just felt very unsettled in some regards. The caveat to that is that our marriage has always been so stable and solid because we work on it really, really hard. And so all of a sudden I was kind of at this crossroads of like, okay, now we have our children here. We both felt very, very strongly that like this is our family as far as we know it. It feels really good. And yeah, it just started feeling this ambition, this stirring in my soul to just grow. There's so much growth in early motherhood. You're a novice. You don't know what you're doing.
Thrown into
Even
it.
with like number 2, number 3. I mean, you never know what you're doing with each new child because they're individuals. But you have some years under your belt and you can pull from these files that you're like, okay, I've done this a time or two. I don't know why there was a stirring or this ambition, but then going back to this dissertation experience and listening to, her name is Liz, I just felt this nudge, and she talked a lot about education. And then fast forward a handful of months from there, I had an experience with a friend, and she mentioned education again. She mentioned something about, oh, you're a talented writer. I just write certain things on Instagram, and I used to do the blog or whatever, and I do enjoy writing. And so I took the liberty to say, oh, that means I should go get my master's in English.
You're like, I'm doing it.
Which is so laughable. And
that's
I went for it. Before we started the episode, you were saying that you and your husband, you just like go and you're fast decision makers, and Casey and I are very similar. So I went and audited a class, an English class at BYU. I had a friend that was the professor, and she let me sit in, and I was doing the assignments for nothing really except to kind of test the waters and see what this all means. Anyway, long story short, I made a call to a friend because that wasn't working out, and he is involved with BYU, and was thinking, well, gosh, do I go into Near Eastern Studies? Do I do a second bachelor's degree? What do I really want? And anyway, he said, Chelsea, his name's Chad Lewis. He said, Chelsea, I don't know what you really want, but why aren't you doing your MBA? And he said that, and I did not get excited at all. I'm
way.
Like, because I have no business being in business.
Yes.
This does not make any sense. And he's like, it makes all the sense in the world. Michelle did it. She thrived. She grew. This is his wife. And anyway, so similar to the English, I'm like, this actually isn't even that exciting, but why not? And then Casey's so great. He was kind of like Chad, building me up, and he's saying, this makes complete sense, right? Like, you want to start building the foundation. It's our whole world. We're building our family office. We're investors, and just the knowledge that you'll gain is completely relevant. Anyway, jumped in, 2 feet in, and now I'm a semester in. I start, I have homework that I probably need to read up on the way home. And it's been exactly what Casey said, relevant to the foundation, relevant to the family office. Had a cool opportunity pop up with this nonprofit iHub that just opened up. It's an incubator for startup companies, young startup companies. And so I'm going to just start helping managing that fund and stepping in, and scared and excited. That's kind of like the theme of the last year.
Usually when you know it's right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right? We talked about that the other day.
I love that.
It's crazy how, you connect the dots looking back, but you kind of have to get moving. And I think for me, the thing that makes me so proud of Chelsea is just how she has just put herself out there. And I think that's like this rare trait. Like, so many people, either out of fear, you don't, because you don't want to look stupid, or you don't want to not be good at what you do. And I think the erroneous paradigm of that is you have to be bad before you're good. And it makes sense in like everything other than us being bad. we just don't like, I don't know of anybody that likes not being good at something and embarrassing themselves. But you kind of have to be willing to get in the arena. And I think, when you think about what type of lessons do you want to go teach your kids, it would be that. It'd be, hey, step out there, try something new, fail, like go make mistakes, get better. And it's easy when you're like out of it and you're telling somebody else to do it, but it's way different. And so it's so fun for me to like watch Chelsea cry at home because the homework's so hard, or kind of break, you push it to that point of breakdown, and then you build yourself back up, and then you have a stronger muscle, you have a stronger emotional muscle, and you have a capability, and so much of it's the swagger. I just like, she has tremendous mojo or swagger that you can just see it's building, and I just it for me, I can't wait to see what she goes and does with it. I truly believe like life is happening for us. It's not happening to us, and that there's a bigger plan. And I don't know what the plan entails, but I just know that she's going to go make like a real dent on the world. And so it's fun to be cheering, cheering for that. And there's other stuff that comes along with it. Like, we do these quarterly offsites, where,
meaning the two of us.
Me and Chelsea, we'll go away for a day, and we'll go plan the coming quarter and review the last one, and review, kind of going out for the year. And we did this in December, and our next 4 months are just insanity. Between kids events and Chelsea's MBA, she's gone every weekend for the next 4 months. Oh my goodness. Every weekend. Yeah. And it's this unique dynamic where, for me, I'm like, hey, this is my opportunity to go step up and be a better dad. Like, I've never had this opportunity in 20 years to spend this much deliberate time with my kids.
But I think what's important to know about you is that, and we talked about this a lot, the initial thought is what's totally natural, like, oh, what are we doing?
Yes.
And do we really want this? And, so it's really commendable of Casey, and it's a muscle that he's exercised, just the muscles of the mind, for him to say, sure, that was my initial thought. But that's going to serve no one. Yes. And actually a massive missed opportunity for me to spend time with the kids, which I think is what you were going to lead into.
And it's also like, that's what she's done our entire marriage. Like, our entire marriage has been, this next 4 months is going to be insane with summer, or these next 4 weeks, you're going to be gone. And there's a choice of, do I get bitter, or do I, hold resentment, or do I have a great attitude and go find the good and go figure out how to be each other's biggest champion? And I just think that's the difference between a marriage working and not working. That's the difference between a business working and not working, is, to step up for each other. And I've experienced that my entire career. That's so cool. And have tried to be that for Chelsea, but it feels like over the last, year to 2 years and going forward, where, don't want to say the roles get reversed, but they do get reversed in a way where you're just coming into a different phase in life, and it's, I don't want to say her time to shine, but like, the victories that she'll see are more public victories, where she's had a tremendous amount of private victories, inside the home, and, with her friends and with her community. But now her role is getting more public, and it's more outward facing. Anyway.
Well, what's the name of the podcast again?
Beyond the Boardroom, Her Story.
Beyond the Boardroom. Yeah. So I think that, if we're delving into that side of the podcast, these women who are supporting these big, dynamic, entrepreneurial men who they love, I think it's, I guess I can only speak for myself. It's really doing what Casey has decided to do just in the last year or so, and saying, what are my opportunities? If this is the situation at hand, if he is consistently going out of town every week, am I going to hold a grudge and be bitter? Because if he could only see what goes on at home, the tears and the tantrums and what is this all worth? Because this seems like crap, you know, for lack of a more sophisticated word.
Oh, I love it.
Instead saying, okay, yeah, I feel that. And I could make that be true, but is it really true? What is actually true is I have an opportunity to have overnighters with my girls in my bed. Yes. And we're going to do slumber parties. And tonight's Callie's night. And we're fortunate to have a TV in our room. So we're going to have popcorn and we're going to have a movie and we're going to create these memories. Or, you know, there's a park down the road and I'm fortunate enough to not have to work right now. And I'm going to spend my time with them. And so it must have been the way that I was raised. You know, I have a coach now that helps me put words to a lot of this. But back then I must have just been going off of subconscious filing and programming from my own mom, who's just a tremendous support to my dad. But I will say what she taught me was honoring her individuality and honoring her time and having the confidence to say, I'm going to do this. And then on the flip side, my dad being just a rock star, equal support to her, saying, yeah, Brenda, she's all in on the church. She just gives 100% to her callings, and she loves her community, and she loves her PTO, and it's so fascinating to me what these kids are absorbing without even knowing it, and it really creates who they are.
It's what caught versus taught.
Yeah, totally.
I love that. Well, and what I'm hearing with you guys too is like you as a team become a team against the problem or the world or the challenge or whatever, instead of against each other, where I think so often I see marriages that struggle, it seems like they're against each other instead of, no guys, like this is the problem. Let's be a team together and face it. But also in the good things too. Let's be a team together. I'm working on this or I'm working on this. And you both have these different sides of your successes privately and publicly. Yeah. And like, I think that's like truly what living big is. Like my whole purpose is helping women see how to live big. And I love both of your examples of like, oh, this is maybe traditionally or in our family, it's always looked this way. And now things are shifting. That's an opportunity instead of, oh man, like I'm not used to that or whatever. Totally. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
I will say one of the biggest gifts Casey gave me early on, we were apart during our engagement, and he had delved into self-help, motivational, inspiring books as a kid because his dad's phenomenal, and said, hey, I'll pay you. I mean, and this was early 2000s, $100 a book, which if you're doing an equivalent in today's economy or whatever, it's like
that's probably
$300, right? Exactly. So he was being incredibly generous, but it changed. I mean, maybe this is audacious to say, but it changed who you were, right? You allowed it to influence you for good. So when we were apart, he sent me the Divine Center and 7 Habits because Covey was big for him. And honestly, I was not a reader growing up. It was not, we were not a huge reading family. And it was really my first look into truth outside of church vernacular.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so I had been raised on truth through and through, which is the greatest gift my parents gave me. But to have it be spoken to in a little bit different language, the Divine Center, not so much. But anyway, point being is that we could only relate and connect through the phone. And so we would talk about these principles and share ideas. And I haven't thought much of that, but that was a real strong, solid backbone at the very start of our marriage, wouldn't you say?
Well, for sure. Like when you're just getting started dating, it's like all I wanted to do was make out with Chelsea.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like anything outside of that was like, you know, but like being forced to be apart for 4 or 5 months.
You're like, let's actually
talk.
You
end up actually like,
you
end up like actually getting to know each other and talking about stuff that matters and things like that. And so it was, it really was so special. And I think for both of us, those concepts, those Covey concepts, that he, became so famous for educating on have been foundational for us. And specifically he talks about this maturity continuum. And he talks about, in life you have this maturity continuum, and it starts out with dependence. And you see this with relationships where you have codependent relationships where you kind of need somebody else's weaknesses to make you feel validated, and they're really like unhealthy because you're like, you're kind of addicted to each other's weaknesses and the arguments and the fights, and then you have kind of this next step of maturity, which is independence, which is you could actually function really well in life without each other. That you could be happy, you could, pay your bills, you could, stay healthy, you could go make an impact in the community. And then you have kind of the highest level, which is interdependence, which is you have two independent people that could absolutely function great without each other, that choose to function together. And that's where you go create synergy. But you look at marriages at this point, it's 50% fail. And it's, easier for a marriage to fail today than any other time in history. You have so much, access to travel, access to information. Like if you want to go figure out what screwed up with your marriage, you can jump on the internet and have all sorts of people validate that, hey, you have this problem and this problem and this problem, where maybe in the history of time that wasn't the case. You're in a small town, or you think your problems are just your problems. And so I think it's, for us, having our marriage be rock solid, and even just philosophically, like this, religious belief or this faith that we share that families can be together forever. That's a really powerful belief. I think it's the most powerful belief, because if we're saying, hey, we're committed forever, then you work through stuff.
Show up differently.
Yeah, and you show up different. Like when it's the same with a business. When you're building a business that's going to be around for a long time, you never cut corners. You always invest. You don't take short-term profits at the expense of long-term growth. And it's the same with our marriage. And I think if there's anything that's allowed us to continue to grow, it's been that we've always invested in the relationship, And I think about like very specific habits and rituals. We pray together every day. We go on dates every week and have for a long time. We go on trips. We go to church on a weekly basis. We go to the temple once a month. Like there's these habits and rituals that you look back 20 years and say, these are like really important things that if you missed one of them, it wouldn't really notice. But if you missed a lot of them, you go down a way different road.
And it's a hard compounding effect to quantify. You can't measure it. I mean, you can measure it by journaling and saying, okay, we look back and we have these documented times of doing this, which we don't do. But that's probably as far as you could measure it.
Totally.
And so it's going back to his comment of like being founded on doctrinal principles, truths, right? That like we believe that following this is going to result in this. And, spending time together is going to result in this. And I mean, we've seen couples, you get to where we are and you get teenagers. And then if you have younger ones, and even if you don't, I mean, teenagers are going to test anybody because they're humans.
I may be calling you in a few
right,
years.
You
like,
can,
hey, I need
and
some
I
help
will
here.
listen to your tears because they're supposed to. They're supposed to push. My girlfriend was telling me, it was my coach, and she's like, honestly, the teenage years where you're at is like the 8th month of pregnancy, where they're like, there is no more room in here. Get me
out of here.
And I don't care if you're uncomfortable. I'm going to jab my elbow into your stomach. Yeah. And so you finally have to relent and say, oh my gosh, I have to start letting go, because if I don't let go, this thing is going to burst and it's not going to end up okay. And, same thing with marriage. It's saying, okay, if those are these external situations going on, what are we going to do so that we are rock solid and stable And I mean, along with what he was saying, I remember a long time ago, you had read either a book from Margie Hinckley or it was a quote
Yeah, it was
from Margie.
Gordon B. Hinckley's biography.
That's right. And he was saying, now I'm going to get it reversed, but I think it was that he wanted to give Margie the wings to fly.
Well, and I think it was her
And Margie,
who actually said
Margie
it.
was actually saying that if I can say yes, I'm going to say yes.
Yeah.
Right? Wasn't it actually saying yes?
It was kind of those two things. It was her saying, that was something that she was always empowered. Probably at a time where more traditional roles,
Yes.
Probably less of that is the norm.
Totally.
And their relationship was always the opposite, where she always had her independence and could go pursue whatever she wanted to go pursue. And she always recognized that was like a great part of their marriage. Mm-hmm. But then also having that mentality that, like if my kids ask for something and I can say yes, that I'm going to go try to figure out how to find a solution versus just shut stuff down. And I think that's like such a powerful, it's just two different brains. One of them's a resourceful brain that you turn on and you get resourceful and you go figure out, hey, how could this be a possibility? Versus the other one that you turn off all resourcefulness and just shut it down. And it's actually easier to just say, we can't afford it, or it's not an option, or don't have time, or whatever.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to use brain space for that, right?
And it's done.
You're just
And you're kind of
right.
yourself
The
of the
decision's already
responsibility.
made. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my ability to support Casey, though, really stemmed from feeling that energy from him. Mm. I didn't know that this would be our world 20 years from now, that I'd actually be pursuing things outside of the home, just because it just was never a part of my vision board. I mean, maybe as a high schooler, because everybody else was talking about this and that I wanted to open a spa one day. And as a kid, I was really into organizing and playing, owning this office space and, playing that role. But I never really aspired to be anything outside of the home. And I was okay with that.
But I think that's like a really important point is if Chelsea ever wanted to be a professional from day one, it would have been just fine. And she would have killed it.
Yeah.
That was just never what she wanted to do. She wanted to be a mom.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It wasn't, it was never me telling her, hey, you need to go be the mom full time.
Hardest job in the world.
We wouldn't be going on 20 years.
No,
Totally.
But it's kind of never been me telling Chelsea anything.
No.
It's never that's just not our relationship and never has been. There's literally nothing from me except for just if you have dreams, I want you to pursue them.
Yes.
Right.
And her dream was to go be a mom, and it still is, and she's a phenomenal mom. But it's just expanding at this point.
Right.
Her identity's expanding, and her aspirations are expanding, and life's changing. There's just times and seasons in life, and this is a different time and season.
You felt that nudge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Casey and I talk about it a lot lately about what is your what and your why, and identifying it, because if not, anxiety settles in and you concentrate on the how, right? I think as humans, our brains want this equilibrium. We want to be balanced, and the how seems to equalize, right? But it's the tyranny of the how, because you can't possibly know the how unless you move your feet, and first and foremost, unless you even know the what. So oftentimes I'll get into these predicaments of I don't know how, and I get paralyzed. We often say paralysis by analysis. You're trying to figure out all the ins and outs. What does the foundation even mean, and how does it look? And it's definitely not like this couple's, and it's definitely not like the Gates Foundation. How do you even get there? And that's kind of my comfort zone, to be anxious and worried, and he'll draw me back in and say, well, what is the what and what is the why? And really, from our earliest days, it was such a gift for me to know what my what was, being a mom, and saying that unabashedly and confidently in a world that was shifting.
Yes.
Right? And shifting for good.
Yes.
Good and for bad. But these women who are powerhouses now that can find a balance and do the home with the work. I think it's brilliant, and I think it's beautiful, and I think that everyone has their own unique story, but you have to own your story. You have to write a beautiful story, and you have to know and identify your what all along the way. Otherwise, you're just going to be damned. You're going to go nowhere.
Yeah, and I think it's human nature to always want what you can't have. And so I think, I went to Harvard Business School starting when I was 30 years old. And there was, these amazing professional women that weren't married and didn't have kids. And the thing that they wanted, and they're from all over the world, was to have a family and have kids. And then you've got somebody on the other end that's looking at it with a family and kids saying, man, I really wish that I could go pursue this profession. And I think that's just human nature. Like whether it's your body wanting a different body type, whether it's where you live wanting to, and I think like the magic is to get comfortable in your own skin and actually just own your story and be proud of your story.
Totally.
And I think when you can get there, it's so empowering to, and specifically it's been fun when Chelsea was doing her MBA, you had to actually articulate your story. And it was fun to see her go through iteration after iteration after iteration of what is your story. And to actually be able to be really proud of the journey that she's chosen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Of actually choosing to go be a professional within the home and to do that at an extremely high level.
Yes.
And now making a new choice to take a bigger role in the community outside of the home. And that doesn't, you kind of have to just be better. You've got to be better with your time. It's
a big rocks again.
What ends up falling off is just the waste.
Yes.
So just the good stuff falls off because you can only do the great stuff. And it requires more planning. It requires more discipline.
Yeah.
It requires waking up earlier. It's funny, we're up every day at 5:30, 6 o'clock the latest. Mm-hmm. There's points in life where that would have been like death.
Totally.
Where now it's like, it's not even an option.
Now you're we gotta.
Well, it's not even
and
optional. It's like if you want to go get a workout and if you want to do some of these other things that personally you want to go do, there's hours in the day when no one else is up that's the only time it's going to happen or it's just not going to happen.
Well, and I feel like when it's kind of that Christmas Eve feeling, we just had Christmas, but in general, I want my students and members and friends and all the things to have that feeling when you go to bed the night before and you're like, I'm excited to wake up for the next day, whatever that looks like, instead of dreading and, we're all tired. We all have all these things going on, but it's having that little whisper of oh, I'm excited for tomorrow. And if you're not there, let's find what that looks like.
But that's a practice. And I think that's the thing.
And a choice. Yeah.
It's a practice and it's a choice. And I think the misconception is that just lands in your lap. And it doesn't. You have to work to go find what makes you happy.
Yes.
Totally.
And you have to work to find what gives you purpose.
Yes.
And I don't think most people spend the time to do the personal work to actually have an opinion on what they're passionate about. Go ahead.
Jesse Itzler was at the MW3, and if you want an actionable step, he said that he will get his journal out or his planner or whatever it is, and before he goes to bed every night, he looks at tomorrow. Do you remember when he talked about this?
Yeah.
And it helps him focus. It helps him get deliberate. But I would venture to say it gets him excited. Yeah. Right? Because you're not going to write down. You're not going to project crummy.
I'm going to get in a fight with so and so.
Right?
Or
No.
Yeah.
It might be the humdrum of going to an appointment, but even that, right? There's opportunity in everything, and so there's a million different practices that you can get into that is customized to yourself and something that personally gets you excited. But that just was top of mind and something that you've adopted. I don't know that you're as diligent because you have your morning routine and, but.
I'm better when I do it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm better when specifically for me, the practice at night, if I can list what I'm grateful for, fatigue really does make a coward out of all men, and I make worse decisions when I'm tired. And at nighttime, I'm tired. So like get like really productive thought or creativity. I just don't. I know some people like thrive at night and get into this flow state, and that's the opposite for me. Like mornings are when I can just have clarity and have it come together. But what I can do is I can get in a better emotional state before I go to bed if I can get into gratitude and identify what's right in life. And so mine has less to do with planning the next day, and it has more to do with like getting in a good emotional state as I wind down the day. And I find that when I do that, I wake up happy, and vice versa. When I go to bed stressed or thinking about something or mad at somebody, I kind of like just turn on that all night long.
Yeah.
And have to go work out of it in the morning.
Yes. So what does that look like for you guys too? Is it a morning routine? Is it these simple practices? Like, what does it look like for you guys to stick with your purpose or shift when needed? Or what does that look like for you, Chelsea?
So mine is I'm a very prayerful person. I meditate through prayer. And so recently I was reading the book Flourish, and he gives a practice of going through what went well, 3 what went wells through the day before you go to bed, and going a step further and identifying why did it actually go well to deepen the practice. So if it's what went well, Callie and I had a great conversation about this TV show that she's into now, which is great. And maybe more so good. What would make it great is to say, why did we actually have a good conversation? Because it really wasn't about the TV show at all. It's because she actually trusts me enough to talk to me, which indicates we have a really solid relationship, which then helps confirm in my mind that the next time things are off, we're actually good. Because I've had way many more, incorrect grammar, I've had many more experiences where the trust is evident than, a little scuffle that is, hormonally based or fatigue based or whatever. And so that's actually a 2025 goal of mine, to be more deliberate and writing down, because I like to do a lot in my head, but I think there is some science behind actually writing it down and getting it on paper and getting it out of your head. So identifying that before I go to bed, waking up, being meditative and prayerful, and then I go straight into a deep gospel study. And then every Sunday I'll go through, similar to Casey, and he can tell his in a second, but I identify who I am, which helps me secure my identity, which I think is crucial to, success in life. And then I have a gratitude portion of what is exciting in my life. And then I have a creation side, which is what are my biggest opportunities? And what do I have going? What are goals? What are ambitions for the next week? So that's really important. And then I'll kind of project to the next 6 months and have a list of that as well. So those are my consistent practices.
Yeah.
I love that.
Mine, very consistent. I'll wake up, I'll meditate, which is a form of prayer. It's kind of different than prayer that I learned growing up, but it's getting,
Centered.
deep into gratitude. It's, thinking about people that are hurting that I can send love out to. And then it's getting really clear on goals or a couple of outcomes that are important to me, and not just thinking about them, but visualizing them and stepping into that experience as if they're accomplished. And I think just that process of creation is so important. And then the second one, I'll go through identity every day, where I'll, ask and answer the question of who am I, and list out this list of, attributes or descriptions of who I am. And even just going through that process, it never gets old. When I'm affirming just kind of the best parts of me or who I aspire to go be, it makes me happy. And then a couple other ones. What gets me excited? Always having just this laundry list of things that light me up in the future, kind of allows me to go push through hard things.
Totally.
Or push through the friction or the resistance because I'm looking forward to something that's
Makes
way
it
bigger.
worth it. Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of getting bogged down in the minutia. And then the last one is, what are my biggest opportunities? And I think as I've allowed myself to really identify the biggest opportunities, it's a forcing function where you start seeing the world out of a lens of opportunities versus problems, because problems are always available, distractions are always available, and you only have so much energy and so much time. And what I found is I've been significantly more effective and resourceful as I've seen the world through a opportunity-focused lens. And so those things, and then lastly, I'll usually just kind of, I'll mix up some questions where sometimes I'll just list what makes me happy. And I think just identifying what makes me happy, it's fascinating because growing up, you would think, hey, when I get this car, then I'll be happy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or when I get this house, then I'll be happy. Or when I go to this place, it'll be happy. And what I've learned and what I've become more aware of over time is that what makes me happy is like these simple daily or weekly rituals that I wasn't fully aware that like they are like the most important thing in my life. And so like, I'll give you some examples. Like waking up and meditating makes me happy. Being on the Traeger and cooking food for my family makes me happy. Watching a football game makes me happy. Golfing makes me happy. Going on a trip with my family, swimming in the pool with my kids, putting my boys to bed, working out. And you start getting this list of like 30, 40, 50, 60 things. And I'm like, I have a lot of stuff every day that I can do that, if your life consists of like the experiences you have, there's a lot of things that create happiness. And I just need to build more of those into my schedule. So it's trying to be like deliberate and aware and pack those in whenever I can pack them in. If, your life is what you do, I want to do more of the things that bring me joy and less of the things that take joy away, and be deliberate about it. And so anyway, those are like some simple daily practices that, have developed over 20 years. They're not something that anybody ever taught us to go do.
Just what works for you.
And mine and Chelsea's are really different. There's been times where I like tried to like take Chelsea through my routine, and she's like, nope, like,
I'm out.
And so they are like very personal, but I think from a principle base, they're solving the same thing, which is like, pray and meditate and connect, and then get clear on what you want to go do, and, affirm kind of who you are and what you're about. And I think getting there in different ways, but kind of with the same intent.
Totally. I love that.
Which is to just show up right.
Yeah.
I think the whole point is that idea that private victories precede public victories. And I think this is so profound and so true. Like, we all look out the window or look on TV and you go see these public victories that people experience. And what you miss is like the lifetime of private victories that they've had to put in the work to go get that like small moment in the spotlight.
Totally.
And if there's anything that I admire about Chelsea, is I've witnessed her for 20 plus years being so almost maniacal, but so deliberate with these private victories. She just doesn't, very rarely misses these practices. And so like I see kind of at this point in life, she gets a lot more public victory. She gets more recognition or more attribution to like the work that she's doing, but it's not different than work she's done our entire marriage. She's just been doing a lot of that work when in private that people don't see it.
So cool. I love that. Well, and I think it goes back to like those become the big boulders, back to what you were talking about of like having these small victories end up being like the biggest and most important things, and figuring out what works for you specifically. Like, just you guys are probably very similar in your thinking, and you have totally different dynamics. And I think a lot of people listen to podcasts like, what's the secret that Casey's doing for this and this and this? And the secret, I think, is what you're saying, is figure out what works for you. The secret isn't, oh, you do this exact list, exactly how I do it,
But what you're describing right there is kind of what Chelsea's talking about, which is the how.
Totally.
And I think what we just talked about right there is that like the how is very different per person. Like life is an art. It's not a science. And it's very, and so there are principles. And so that's where the what and why becomes so important, which is like, what do you want and why do you want it? The how, there's just a lot of different ways to get there. And it's different for different people. And I think that's where people get off track. Is if you're trying to like copy somebody else's exact how.
It's probably not going to work.
There's absolutely practices that you can cherry pick from different people that will make you more efficient. But if you don't have like a very clear what and a very compelling why, the hows are just like almost like mindless or like soulless tasks, and there's just going to be no staying power.
You're floating,
just kind of there.
It's probably the biggest deception of life, right? Because you fast forward in that state 10, 20, 30 years, and you're going to be frustrated thinking, I've done A, B, and C all this time, decades.
Such a good point.
And I don't feel any further ahead. And why is that person? Because that person followed their individual exactly what you were saying, Andrea, that they said, okay, I'm going to cherry pick this, this, and this, because it actually aligns with my what and my why, my drive.
So where I've noticed this like growing up, and it was funny because I saw this when I was like in high school sports. We had like great high school football teams. And the structure was so rigid. You show up at this time, you do this workout, you show up to this practice, you go to bed at this time, and it actually is way easier because you don't have to think that much. You can just kind of do it. And then the season would end, and we would be lost. That was when we start drinking. That's when we start getting into trouble. That was when like the idleness, because we didn't have like this tight structure.
Someone to tell you all the things.
And I see this with kids on the mission, where they go on the mission and they have this exceptional mission because they had this like very tight structure. And I think what's missing is the creation, building the capability to create your own structure. But to create your own structure, you need to know where you're going, or the what, and you need to know why you're going there. And then you can go seek out the best ways to go build that path for yourself. But if you don't have those things, you're just, it's like trying to navigate a map of a city with the wrong map. And you just get lost faster. And I think, that's kind of what gets me excited about the future. And specifically, when you go to like, what's this podcast all about? I've seen, if there's anything that Chelsea is exceptional at, she's always known the what, and she's always like found a tremendous amount of reasons why those things are important. So it's fun to take that ingredient that was so natural on being a mom and being a mother and being a spouse, and taking that same ingredients of what and why and applying it to something that's completely new that she's starting over. And but with the same ingredients. And so it's fun. Like, it's not surprising to me that she's having the success that she's having. She's always had that success.
You've been practicing that from the beginning. Yes. I love that. Well, I have so many more questions, but my last one that I want to ask you guys, it's the one that I was like starring, that I was like, oh, I really want to ask them this. You guys are both such a good example of giving to like publicly, and I'm sure there's a lot of private giving that you guys do. What role has that played in the empire that you've built and the family that you've built and the life that you've built together? Because I think, to me, that's like such a good example. And I love that you're public about it, because I have a hard time with that, where I'm like, well, I don't want to show this because I don't need the praise, but then I don't want want to encourage and support other people to do the same. And I just see you guys do that so well. So that's my last question for today. What does that look like for you, and why is that so important?
Casey and we are honing in on the legacy that we want to leave for our family and our posterity. And I think that everyone does it a little differently. We have big time giver friends, so many, countless, and some specifically who really love to do it privately, and they feel very good about that. And Casey's always been public about his life and never for fanfare. It's just who he is. And I've been a little bit more private, for good and for bad. And I do think that we want it to be public enough that it's inspiring, first and foremost, to our kids, and to teach them that our name really does matter, and that a name on a building isn't the end all. And if that's what it is in certain respects and how we give and receive recognition, we're actually proponents of that in some regard, because our name really matters to us. And we talk to our kids a lot about what it means to be a Baugh. And so, ironically, on a selfish front, giving is a lot for the legacy that we want to leave for our family. And then, you think about generational growth and what that can do over time. I think 100 years from now, we'll be like rolling over in our graves thinking like, how did we do that, and be really proud.
Yeah, and I think giving is like it's a very simple concept, but it's actually pretty complex, because you think about, like, there's been points for all of us where we didn't have any money, but you can always give. Like, you can always give good energy. You can always be considerate. You can always take time out of your day to remember somebody's name. Like, so there's like so much of giving is a mindset, and it's an attitude of how you show up. All of us have friends that don't have a lot of physical resources that are like the most giving people in our lives, and vice versa. People that have a lot of resources that don't give very much, don't show up, and I think it's always been important to us. We've had phenomenal mentors, and still do. One of the greatest gifts that we had when we were really young, we moved into a neighborhood. I think I was 27 or 28. Chelsea's 3 years younger. And we moved into a nice neighborhood. It was this like unique window in time where the world had blown up financially. And we bought a house that we never could have got into, and it was in a foreclosure. And we ended up in this neighborhood with people that were 12 to 15 to 20 years older than us, that were all really affluent and really successful. So we just had like these great, amazing mentors that were almost like parents to us, that just taught us like what it was like to raise kids, what it was, kind of gave us a view of what life was going to look like 10 or 15 years in the future. And I know that it impressed us so much to say, that's the life we want to go live. Like when we fast forward to the end, this is the life that we want to go live. And so I think there's like giving your time, effort, energy to your family, to your community. And that's like 100% aligned with giving. But then there's the physical, and the physical is like for me, it's an interesting test of like how abundant you're feeling that day. There's obviously like responsibility, like you go buy the building and then let the building go give forever. Like you don't need to go like, there's a balance of responsibility to say, I need to go take care of my family, and I need to go take care of my investments, and I need to be growing, and I'm going to give. And it's not one or the other. You can do both, and you can do both as you grow. And I think for us, it's come down to be more resourceful. Go figure out how to go create more value in the world so that you have more to give. Go grow so you can have more to give. But it's super important to us. And, Chels talked about kind of the outward facing gifts. We've had a couple in the last couple of years that are kind of legacy type gifts. We did a significant donation to Primary Children's Hospital. And then just barely, we did the biggest gift that we've ever done to Utah Valley and
University.
And both of those were deliberate on having our name either on the Entrepreneurial Institute or because there's a social dynamic that comes with it where when people see other people giving, it inspires them to give more. And specifically around UVU, they need to go raise money for this program. And so we're trying to get out in front and lead and say, hey, we're writing a check. It's a big check. It's this much money. You should do it too. And if we all do it, then like we can go move this. So there is like some social signaling that is important from marketing. You know, like if you don't know what other people are doing, you don't know like
where you
what's
could do
possible,
the same.
how you could contribute.
Yeah.
So there is
the irony to the name though is that when people see a name, they don't see dollar signs. When I see the Peterson's name on a building, or Karen and Scott Smith, like these names that are really big in our community, or Ryan and Ashley Smith, I don't see dollar signs. You know that, but I see the core character strengths. I see
and
what
where
that is.
they're putting their money.
And so 9 times out of 10, or 99.9% of the time, if you were in our home and around the kitchen table with our family and we're, having a 2-minute discussion, because that's all we'll get with our kids, on what does it mean to be a Baugh, I could confidently say that our kids would say kind. I mean, we drill it in year over year over year. And then as they grow older, they can decide what does that kindness actually look like. And if they're in a financial spot to actually give and make those like physical donations, I think that they would decide to do that. But ultimately, whatever name they carry, because of being kind, that's a catalyst.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, I think just getting to know you two better, I think you are true reflections of what kindness is. And it's not niceness, right? It's being kind. I think that's different. You're willing to say what needs to be said, or to do the right thing, or to do it out of purpose. And I value that so much. And I think time is our greatest commodity. So I'm so grateful for your guys' time and your story and your effort and your building of each other up. And the lives that you live are super inspiring. And I love that you're all about giving. I think that's like the thing that I associate with the two of you. And just know that has inspired me many times to be like, oh, I'm going to give till it hurts, or I'm going to, it's supposed to hurt a little bit, or just having that perspective of like what's most important in life. And so I think that's true success, and I appreciate you both. Is there anything you'd like to say?
No, just thanks for having us, and keep going. Thank you. You starting down this road, you never know. And I'm sure you get feedback from people, and there's like little nudges along the way, saying, hey, this really helped me, keep going.
Yes.
But yeah, keep going. Keep shining, let your light shine, and
Thanks.
You never know who needs it or who's going to hear it. And so it's, and I think the niche that you have is it's a service that needs to be rendered, and you're doing a good job. So
thank you guys. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
you guys
thanks
are
for having us.